Rwanda thing and the divide between the first and third world. And one of the things I touched on was the inherent victim complex of the United States, and that this goes through everything. Americans in general tend to see themselves as the underdogs, as the victims in the world, even though they are the perpetrators. They are the evil empire, and they don't want to see it. They still want to believe that they're the victims. And there's a tremendous victim complex that has run through the American people since the day the country was founded. They were founded on getting away from religious oppression from the Church of England. And since that day, regardless of the fact that they slaughtered off the indigenous population, regardless of the fact that they essentially used an entire race of people as slaves, they still see themselves as the victim no matter what. And this very much continues to this day. I use the example of the old war propaganda movies where you have the handful of Marines going up against all of the Nazi Germany soldiers on one unique mission, or a handful of Marines, trying to last against 3,000 Viet Cong soldiers, and how they're always the underdog and the victim in this, and it never accurately portrays how the war actually was, and that is an act of imperialist aggression by the United States. Now, this goes through everything from the left to the right to conservative to liberal. This goes right through every single group. Nobody is immune to it. I mentioned yesterday about the chauvinistic divide between first world and third world blacks. Now, I want to go to something that is very specifically American and not something tied intrinsically to the black population. The right always believes that they're the victims of immigrants. All the immigrants are taking their jobs, yet they're also on welfare at the same time. Our race is dying, etc. And they feel the victims, even though they hold basically the main power in society. They still feel like they're the victims. I mean, even with for a lot of the American mentality in general, England was oppressing us. We were liberated in 1776, etc. Now it's all about how the government here is oppressing us. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned bank, which is not. And the conspiracies about whole kinds of things. That's why the U.S. is one of the worst places in the world for conspiracy theories, due to the overwhelming victim complex. I mean, you could just refer to someone like Alex Jones, with someone who has that amount of wealth, that amount of power in society, by being able to influence that many people. It still sees himself as an eternal victim of that same system. Now, this is not to say the left doesn't have an equivalent as well. They certainly do. If you look at basically any first world leftist groups, as soon as there's any kind of argument over oppressions or systemic anything, all of a sudden it turns into oppression Olympics. Immediately. And then they even go so far as to start making ranks, like, oh, this is a white person, this is a gay white person, this is a black person, this is a black gay person, etc. And they start, like, people make these whole bloody friggin' lists of where they are in a hierarchy of privilege, and that no matter what, they have always found a way to make themselves a victim. Like, nobody, like, none of them will actually admit they actually benefit from living in the first world. They won't even admit that they benefit from imperialism, etc. To the point of absolute absurdity, like, to a ridiculous point. Here's another good example, a very concrete example. The New York Maoists, before they dissolved, they had a ridiculous theory that the U.S. was semi-feudal. I don't know how that was supposed to work, but they believed that because there were still farmers in the U.S., that meant the U.S. was a semi-feudal society, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But that was very typical of their political line. They had to find some way to make Americans look like the victims, even though they were constantly confronted with the reality of the imperialist world. Their leader would say, neither Assad nor the rebels, in that we shouldn't take a side, they're all bad, which actually goes against Maoist theory, because Mao would talk about primary and secondary contradiction, that being primary contradiction fighting imperialism. But apparently that whole lesson, that whole very fundamental basic concept of Maoism was lost on them for some reason. Now, this continues in other groups, in other places, and then you see people who were in this. I'm going to specifically speak to white people on this one. There are cases where white people suddenly discover that they're gender fluid. They're not claiming to be trans, but they're not claiming to be gay. They're not claiming to be bi, any kind of sexual minority. But all of a sudden, they decided that they're gender fluid and they're oppressed now. I mean, a lot of that is absolutely ridiculous. And these were people who were perfectly regular yesterday, but then called out on privilege for being white or called out on privilege for being first world, all of a sudden decided that now they're genderqueer all of a sudden and that they're oppressed by it. When, in fact, day to day, nobody would even notice that they were genderqueer, etc. And that's a big thing. That's a big